Cousin Brucie.
Welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith International. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thank you for spending some time with us. Well, we're in for a real treat. Joining me today is a very special guest whom you know from his time on the airwaves at 77 WABC and WCBS FM in New York and Sirius XM satellite radio. Legendary radio personality and Brooklyn's own Bruce Morrow, known to his fans worldwide as Cousin Brucie, is here to discuss his new show, Cousin Brucie's Saturday Night Rock and Roll Party. We'll also talk about his decision to return to WABC in New York, where he worked for 13 years beginning in 1961, and why radio remains as popular as ever in a crowded media landscape. Bruce, thank you for being with us. Truly, it's an honor.
Well, my pleasure. It's my honor. You know, when you said Brooklyn's own, I don't know, I wasn't on camera, I guess, at the time. I had a big smile. You know, it's amazing. You mentioned the word Brooklyn, and no matter where you are in the world, it gets a smile or conviviality and hugs when we were able to hug in those days. There's a magic about that, about being a Brooklyn boy.
You know, I have a question for you a little bit later, but why don't we start with that, and then we'll get to you're coming back to WABC, since Brooklyn is the subject here. You're a product of Brooklyn. How did that upbringing, you know, the movies at the Avenue U Theater, Coney Island, the delis, the subway, James Madison High School, how did that melting pot of a borough with its own special character shape your early life and make you into such a people person?
Well, I think you had no choice. You grew up right on your block, right? And you played with all the kids. Now, what was so nice about growing up on my block and in my neighborhood, which was Flatbush, I grew up at East 26th Street between V and W, and there was a mixture on the block. We had Italian, Irish, Jewish, Spanish. We had some black people, right? So it was like a mixture of families. And growing up like this was very natural. And because of that natural habitat, you learn to like people, and you learn to look at people right in the eye and saying, "There's a nice person," or "Not a nice person." Not a nice person, you stay away from them. But what's so good about this training, and your parents, of course, and your teachers, and your religious leaders, they all obviously add into this mixture. But the biggest part of it was growing up on that block and learning to get along, play, and learn with the people you grew up with, their parents and the kids themselves. So I think that's what is instilled in Cousin Brucie here. And I owe everything to East 26th Street between V and W.
Well, it's great to have you back on AM radio and streaming all over the world. After 15 years on satellite radio, how does it feel to be back home at WABC?
Wonderful. Yeah, I woke up, I'll tell you, Dan, I woke up one day. It's kind of wild. If I may tell you this story, I'm on Sirius XM, and I'm there 15 years. About year 13, I started getting ants in my pants, good Brooklyn expression. And I started saying, I'm happy here. It's a great experience. I'm reaching millions of people all over the world. But in my heart, something's missing. And I couldn't figure out, I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know what it was. Something was not right that I had in my previous radio stations. So one day I'm sleeping, half sleeping, get up, and I said, that's it. I'm in corporate radio. I'm doing corporate radio. Sirius XM, a very successful organization, extremely corporate. There's no heart. I don't think there's a soul there. The culture is very different. They do a great job with delivery, communication. But the local feeling in your heart, East 26th Street, that should be received in Chicago and South Dakota was not there. And I had to find that again. It took me a couple of years. And one day, one of my listeners, whose name was John, that's all I knew, he used to call me on Saturdays with his wife, Margot. This is a weird story. Wow. And he used to ask me for the Everly Brothers and Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry. And we started talking. And one day, somebody came over to me and said to me, hey, listen, that guy you talk to on Saturdays once in a while? That's John Katsimitis. He just bought WABC. And I said, what? He bought it, wrote a check. It's amazing. And bought the station. Now, how does somebody, an individual, buy a mega monster radio station like that? He did it. So pretty soon our discussions of Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis turned a little more serious. The day after my contract ended at Sirius XM, which I extended 2 weeks, I left. I left him because I had to leave. I signed a deal with John and WABC. I'm now on the air, and I'll make this short because we might talk about this later. I'm on the air and I feel I'm home. I'm talking to people in South Dakota and California. I'm talking to people in the Philippines. But there's one thing different. I ain't corporate, right? I'm a homeboy. And they're listening to somebody broadcasting from Brooklyn or New York. I'm out in Brooklyn now. I'm up my upstate home. But I'm broadcasting from home. And the home goes. They feel it. You know, you cannot fib that. You cannot fudge that. If you're at home with somebody and you're having a visit, see, there's my secret. I'm going to give you my secret. I don't talk, and I might have told you this, I don't talk at people. I'm looking at you right now in your eyes, and I'm talking to you. And that's what I do on the air. I talk to my audience. Every one of them feel like I'm talking to them individually. There's my secret. And that cannot be done with corporate radio or corporate television. It's local. It's home.
Well, I can identify with that, Bruce, because you began working on WABC in 1961 in the early days of rock and roll. But growing up, I listened to your show on our kitchen radio in Keene, New Hampshire, but I'd have to fiddle with the dial for a while to make sure I could get the signal because, the interference would come in and out. We were about 250 miles from New York. I think I was typical of your listeners at that time, a young teenager who loved the music and the way you delivered it. Now, with the internet, you just talked about satellite radio, but with WABC, you're still reaching, I think in those days, they used to say WABC reached listeners in more than 30 states. But now with streaming, I'm sitting here in my living room in Washington, D.C. I go to WABC.com and I get your program. How does it feel to still have that global audience?
It feels wonderful. Feels wonderful and much more secure the way we're delivering it. See, delivery has changed quite a bit. When I left WABC the first time, Dan, it was 40, I almost hate to say it, 46 years ago, right? I don't feel it. I don't feel the age. There must have been a mistake at the hospital in Brooklyn. There's a different feeling today, and it's because of technology. But, and it's a big but, however, underline, technology, devices are not the answer. The answer is content. The audience has become so super sophisticated compared to what they were in the 60s. They used to listen to me like you did as a kid. You wanted to hear the latest records. You want to hear what I said. You want to hear the number. Last week it was this week it was that. Very nice. But today, people have grown used to content. So they will seek you out. So it doesn't really matter. It's wonderful to have the devices, don't get me wrong. It doesn't matter if you're on the internet, if you stream. I tell people we have so many devices today that if they go to their refrigerator, Dan, open the freezer, I'm in the freezer section. I mean, we're all over the place. And every day more devices are added. I tell Alexa, I got to say this low because I have Alexa next door. I say, Alexa, let me hear 77 WABC. Well, on Alexa, Google Assistant, iHeartRadio, right? We have WABCMusicRadio.com. Now, just the other day, they put all my shows, I call it on demand, but it's called podcasting. Podcasting, which is like a narrow cast, but they're going to have all of my shows for the past several weeks, and it's on there in case somebody misses it. I mean, you cannot depend upon somebody's to just be there for you every single week. A lot of people can't. They have obligations and other responsibilities. So now they can get it by pushing a button. So it has changed so wonderfully, but content is king, right? You have to give that audience what they are seeking. Otherwise, they have a lot of places to go.
Your fans are really loyal, but what's interesting to me is how over the years you keep crossing over into new demographics. For for example, I listened to your show a few weeks ago. A woman called in, said it was their 11th wedding anniversary. And she asked you to play Only You by the Platters. Now, I'm guessing
Yeah.
that couple probably is somewhere in their mid-30s. What is the secret of attracting the new demographics to your fan base?
It's the visiting, it's the warmth, it's the bridge. Once again, they are seeking something. Now, this 30-year-old something probably had her brother or sister or mother listening to me. She grew up with that. Now, here's a very important point that we should talk about. You're probably going to ask me this. What is it? What is it that people are looking for today? How come Cousin Brucie once again walks in the WABC radio after all this other experience on other radio stations that you mentioned and is accepted in homes like that, in cars? The sensitivity of communications is amazing. It's gigantic. And what people are looking for today is an escape. They want a connection. They want to get away from, hey, we are all so anxiety ridden today. You are, I am, as silly as I am and as a character as I have my very serious moments too. And Jody and I, just like everybody else, we have our anxieties. With what's going on in our lives politically and physically and mentally. I mean, it adds up and it gets to you, right? You try to go over that with what you're doing creatively and spiritually and in your heart. And that's what pulls you through. What they're looking for is a connection. They want to go back. I'll tell you a funny thing, kind of interesting, putting this show together, if I may. I said, well, it's 2020, because I talk to myself once in a while like that, right? Sometimes I listen to me, sometimes I don't. And I said, what am I going to do? Well, obviously, I'm going to play the music that my audience wants to hear, 60s based. I play 50s and a good touch, as I said, of the 70s, right? That's what I play, 50s, 60s, 70s. All right, so I go on the internet, and I'm interviewed all over the country. We have our PR firm that represents me, and I do a lot of interviews, and I start talking about what I want to do. We get a lot of journal, a lot of ink. And first I was going to play some 80s too. I think it is 2020. The response immediately was, no 80s, Brucie. You're not 80s. 50s, 60s, 70s. Stay with the 60s, stay with the 70s. The people, vox populare, the people have spoked, right? The people have spoke. I'm giving you Latin and bad English in one sentence. Not bad. Then I said, well, okay, got it. I'm going to do that's what I want to do, because that's where I'm most comfortable. And that music, I love that music. And that music, by the way, is still your basic foundation. The Beatles and everything else. You find it in a lot of today's music in 2021, right? It's all here. You listen to certain groups, you hear it. You hear my music. So I'm going to do that. Then I said, but you know what? I'm not going to do those jingles. I don't want to do those jingles. It's 2020. Wrong. Whoa, did I get it? They want those jingles. Once again, they want to hear what they heard when they were 16, 17 years old, 14 years old. They want that. Jingles. So what do? I go out with our program director, David Labrosi, and we get a hold and we contract to get my old jingles back, all of them, right? A place down in Dallas, Texas called Jam. They do all the jingles, and they have these in their library. Then I said, all right, I got that, the music, the jingles. I'm not going to do that silly, hello, everybody, this is Cousin Brucie, echo. You know what, a reverb, we call it reverb. You got the reverb, and it's even worse than that. I'm not going to do that. It's 2020. Wrong again. Shows you what a genius I am. They insisted to have that echo. They wanted the reverb. So the music, the jingles, the reverb, right? With Cousin Brucie, put that together. You have remembrance, you have memories, you have a safety net. You have a place to make a connection at home. And that's what I did. And that's what I do. And now I'm going to be going 4 hours. I started with 3 hours. And on the 31st, I'll be going 4 hours. I'll be going up from 6 to 10, which is what I'm comfortable at. I needed that extra hour. It was too fast for me.
If I can, I want to go back in time a little bit. We talked about Brooklyn, but I want to also move the time machine.
You said the word. Okay.
I want to move the time machine back here. So you attend New York University and you establish a small radio station there, one that you put together literally with tape and baling wire. Was it at NYU that you really caught the radio bug?
Yes, I went to Brooklyn College first. For some reason, I couldn't find the classes. They moved them. I didn't have the interest. I just didn't have the desire. So it was mutually decided that I leave Brooklyn College. And I found New York University, and they found me. And this is where I developed. Because I had the skill, I had radio skill from PS 206 and from James Madison High School in Brooklyn. Thanks to them, I really did. But I really developed my skills at New York University. And I was very fortunate to have a professor, became a mentor who really believed in me, And because of this man, I developed. And one day I said, we need a radio station here at NYU. There was no radio station. We used to have radio classes. So you'd get a microphone, like this, and you say, hey, we go into a Volvo. That's a heavy son of a gun. Wow. You record into a woolen sack and then play it back for the class. That was the radio. That's no good. That's not education. That's not experience. So I went into this dean's office, the dean of our division of communication arts, they called it then. And it happened to be snowy and rainy that day. I was very lucky. It was a bad day. And I walked into his room with my galoshes. Galoshes were these overshoes that were big and ugly. We wore them in Brooklyn. They were terrible. You think you were going into a mud mine or something. Well, I was muddy and snowy, and I went on his new carpet. Well, as I walked in, I didn't know. I walk in, he invited me in, and I see his eyes, whoop, everything dilates. I'm on his rug with my mud. And he says, yes, what can I do for you? He wasn't too friendly. I said, I want to build a radio station. He says, you want? I said, I want to build a radio station at NYU. My name is Bruce Morrow, and I can build a radio station. He said, all right, here's $28, get out. He didn't want me in his room, in his office. He gave me $28. And like you said, I went out and I bought wire. I bought a used Dynavox, don't forget it, phonograph. I had a microphone from our radio club, and we had a little room for a studio. I took the wire, clipped it onto the back of the Dynavox, right? And the Dynavox record player, opened the window, threw the wire down 4 stories below to a green room, a lounge. And I went into that lounge with alligator clips, and I went to the back of the big console radio and I connected the alligator clips. Went back upstairs, we went on the air, played some records on the Dynavox, spoke into the microphone, we had a radio station. Within 6 months, it became so popular, we were in 20 lounges. And this time it was being carried by what they call carrier current. We didn't have to wire things. So, it's carrier current, I believe. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a techie. I love technology, though. And AM, AC radio, AC power, electrical, can carry a signal. And it carried it to all these different places. We were on the air. We sold commercials. I went over to, I remember, London Records, FFRR, full frequency range recording, they used to call it. And I begged them for some albums. They gave me the whole catalog. And I was in business. We did news, we did some sports, we did interviews, we talked to professors, talked to kids, and we had a radio station. It grew. And today they're on the air with a regular radio station that's on the air. So I'm very proud of that. Great experience. Now the next question you should ask me, did you ever go to classes?
Did you go to classes?
I don't think they had any. I wanted to ask you. I was too busy. But look, let's face it. What is education? Anybody can read a book. I mean, I'm not denigrating. I'm not putting it down. Books are very easy, right? Your education comes from the socialization, the doing things, the being hands-on things, and building relationships and building things. That's where I got my education. That's where I got my degree. And I'm very proud to have that bachelor's degree from NYU. And I hold an honorary doctorate degree now from Montclair University. They gave me an honorary doctorate. So it's Dr. Cousin Brucie, if you will.
Wow. I want to ask you about New York as a center of radio. There were cities that had a real lively radio music scene, like Philadelphia, Chicago, the home of Chess Records, and of course Detroit with the Motown sound. But New York was the real center of rock and roll radio. Many of the doo-wop groups came out of the New York area. The recording business was largely based there in those days. What was it like to be working on radio in New York in that era?
Well, this is where it was all at. Everything funneled into New York City in those days. If you were in Chicago, LA, Morgantown, West Virginia, little tiny towns in North Dakota, it didn't matter. Everything funneled. If it was real or just perceived, it funneled into New York City. It was great. I was in the major market. I was in the market, the city that everything was happening and coming from. If it was developing, devices, electronics, all the things were developing in New York City is where the corporations were or wish they were. And the aesthetic part, the poets, all gravitated to New York. Whether they lived in LA, I mean, there's every kind of sound. There's a New Haven sound. There's a Los Angeles sound. There's a Chicago sound, like you mentioned. Every sort of middle city and dorf had a sound of their own, which is the beautiful part about the music I play, rock and roll. Right? It always has a local feel to it. But New York was the place to be. New York was the place, and I was right there in the middle of it. I was very lucky. I didn't plan it that way. I started my career in Bermuda when I graduated New York University, and I sent out 8 demo tapes. We used to call them in that day, little reel-to-reel things on little round things on tape, and 6 of them came back and suggested I go in my father's business. That radio was not for me. 2 of them came back. One was in Bermuda, which was exciting, ZBM in Bermuda. And the other one was from a place in Florida, northern Florida. And they wanted me to come and work for them. The owner called me about 2 days later, offered me the job physically. I got so scared I had my father come to the phone. I never had a job before. I didn't know what that meant. I knew I was going to leave home and my chocolate chip cookies and milk, and that scared me very badly. I wanted my Mrs. Toll's conditions. What was I going to do? All right, somewhere in Florida, somewhere. Right? They didn't even have a bagel those days. I think they thought a bagel maybe was a spare tire on somebody's car. So he offers me this job, and my father's on the phone, and I'm quiet. I'm scared stiff. And so my father, being a New York kid, he grew up in East New York, very street smart. Not in the business. My dad manufactured children's clothing, and he said to him, "Well, what does the job entail, and how much are you going to pay him?" He says, "Well, we'll give him $70 a week," which it was in those days. It was not. It was it was like earning 20 today or something. It was all right, and my father would subsidize me. He said, he'd get me a place to sleep and send me my allowance, etc. And that's it. And he said, all right, so it's $70 a week. What are his responsibilities? He says, well, Bruce would work in both of our businesses. So I see my father pull back and the antenna went up. He says, what do you mean both businesses? Well, our radio business, whatever the heck it was, I think it was Panama City I'm thinking about. He'll be on the air for 4 or 5 hours, do his shows. We'll teach him. We know that he's new at this and he has experience, but he's new. And then he'll go out and sell time on his show. And then he'll work on our other business. Stop. It almost sounded political. He was sort of hiding something. So my dad right away closed in on him. He says, what's the other business? He says, well, Mr. Morrow, we own a car wash. Listen to this. This is funny. It's not so funny. My heart was pounding. What a car wash? What he says? Yeah, he'll work 4 hours in the car wash. So here I am. I got to bring towels or something and dry cars. So we immediately said to him, "Thank you, but no, thank you." We hung up, and that's it. Bermuda called, and that was exciting to me. That was the idea of going to a foreign country, which was like 90 minutes off North Carolina or something. It's not exactly a foreign country. This little 20 square mile island. I spent a year there, and that's where I really developed my skills of being on the air. They used to call me the Hammer. I brought rock and roll to that island very early. It was very quiet till I got there. calypso ballads and things like that. I did church services. I engineered things. I did football, like soccer in those days. And I learned my skills about music. And I was called the Hammer because they never heard anybody sound like the music, which I got from my mentor, my other mentor, Alan Freed, who was the granddaddy, the grandfather, great grandfather of rock and roll radio. So Bermuda lasted about a year, 1 year. And I left there. Well, it wasn't a very happy event. It's in my book. In fact, 20th Century Fox bought this book years ago, and it was almost a movie about my experience in radio. And this particular experience was going to be a major part. The island was not exactly, how do I put this nicely, understanding to a lot of ethnicity, religions. It was, and I never really felt any anti-religious experience. Stupid things with kids maybe, but growing up in Brooklyn, growing up in New York, you don't really have to face that at an early age. You don't realize what's going on till you get into the world. Then you realize, oh, we're all in the same garbage can, right? And we got to get out of it. So I experienced that very early. There was a little church, a black church on the other end of the island that burned down. And they asked me to help them rebuild. I was on the air and I did something called Search Party. And I used to have kids come up and dance while I did music. And that was not accepted very happily and graciously by the people because it was black and white kids. And they were dancing. I didn't know. I had no experience in that thing. So I helped these people rebuild their church. I made some money. I hired a hall in Hamilton, Bermuda, which is their capital city, and I held a big record out. Made some money for them, helped them rebuild the church, and then I was invited to leave because they weren't happy that I got involved. Let's put this way, a foreigner got involved. I don't hold any grudges or animosity. I was understandable. It wasn't nice. It wasn't right. But that island learned its lesson and it's changed today. It's quite understanding now, quite understanding. So it's funny. People don't realize that I'm a person and I go through a lot of these traumatic experiences, just like everybody else, the everyday nonsense that we all go through. And I think the world is ending because you can't find a Band-Aid or something like, and then experiences like that, which really, once again, help make the man, help make the person. I'm very grateful that I went through it. It was horrific at the time because I had no experience. It got so bad for me on that island, Bermuda, that when I left the radio station, I was always on at night. I was always very comfortable being on in the evening. And I used to walk home, and in my pocket was a lead pipe, a big lead pipe that was down a pant leg, because I started getting threats, people, that I had people of different color on my radio shows. And I got all kinds of letters and phone calls. So I used to walk home. I used to have somebody with me, but I was always ready. And anytime a palm tree would shift in the moonlight, I'd jump because I thought this was it. So it was good. So it was a great experience. I had a great time there learning radio, but it was time to leave at their request.
Bruce, when you got to New York for a disc jockey, it wasn't only being in the booth and behind the mic. You had to make personal appearances, or that was something that was part of the job and part of the scene. Department store appearances. In the early 60s, you hosted some of the most popular rock and roll performers at Palisades Park, a popular amusement park across the Hudson River from New York. There's a photo of a poster in your autobiography, which is Cousin Brucie, My Life in Rock and Roll Radio, of a show that you hosted that featured, among others, on the same bill, Fabian, Chubby Checker, the Shirelles, the Jive Five, the Earls, the Mystics, and even Bob Crew. I saw Bob Crew's name on there. Now, these were not the rock concerts of today, big arenas with fireworks and all kinds of surround sound. You could literally reach out and touch the performer, as you describe it in the book. Why were those Palisades Park shows so important for the artists, the disc jockey, and the fans?
All right, let's start at the artist, first of all, because I'm going to keep me for last. I keep the whipped cream for me. I learned that a long time ago. For the artists, it was an amazing event because the publicity you couldn't purchase. Irving Rosenthal, who was the owner of Palisades Amusement Park, right, would spend $0 and receive, like he called it, $1 million worth of publicity, Brucie, every week. He made deals. He made all kinds of deals with radio stations, buses, subways, posters in the street, the 3 sheets or whatever they call them, right? And pay like this, 0. He'd make deals. He always gave a donut and got back a loaf of bread. This kind of thing. So the artist would receive, like he said, $1 million worth of publicity. It was amazing. I'd also play their music, and the radio stations would all play the music. So these acts, and you mentioned one particular week, every week it was like that. I produced those shows. I got the acts. We didn't hire them. They'd come in for the publicity. That's how strong promotion was in those days. I didn't have to pay them a red cent. I wouldn't even give them a box of popcorn. I mean, they bought their own popcorn. They come on, and we had a great time. Palisades Park was a place, like I said in the book, where we grew. We all grew up. So did the performers. So to get on the bill, get on a show at Palisades Park meant the world to the record company, the promotion people, and of course to the artists. So that's number one. The audience. Let's go to part 2. Did I answer that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
More? You want me to elaborate? I can keep on talking. You know that. All right. The audience. Well, here was an opportunity of every Saturday and Sunday afternoon to see a free show with the most current big stars. Now, albeit the devices on the stage were not great, everybody lip synced. Why did we lip sync? What do you think? What do you think, Dad? Why did I have everyone lip sync?
Well, you didn't have a band there to back them up.
Money makes the world go around, the world go around. Money. We couldn't afford, I didn't have a budget to pay for it. You're right, a live band. So everybody lip synced. Now, in those days, lip syncing was politically correct and was accepted by the audience. They would sit there under the sun or the snow or the rain, didn't matter, right? Thousands of them, and watch that stage. Watch Cousin Brucie come on in a leopard skin suit, which I still have, right? I still wear it. We do Palisades Park reunions because Palisades Park became part of DNA of anybody who grew up in this area. DNA. I mean, you say Palisades Park, they say, oh, God, yeah. Right away. They know it. Right away, connection, right? Heart. So they'd sit there and have a great time. And the shows were free. And even if you didn't want to pay to go into the park and pay $1 or $1.50, if you handed in 2 tea bags of one of my sponsors, 2 tea bags or a Del Monte's carrots and peas can label, you get it. I mean, he was always making deals, this man.
Actually, the poster says admission is 6 tea bags or 30 cents.
Oh, that was a big one then. 6 tea bags. That was way out of line. And 60 cents? I never remember that.
No, 30 cents. 6 tea bags or 30 cents.
Isn't that amazing? Well, anyway, so they'd see these free shows. And everybody, the shows took hours. Then they go, and he knew what he was doing. They go on the rides. They pay for this. They buy cotton candy. They go into the circus restaurant. I mean, this man was a very astute marketeer. Amazing. All right. Is that good enough now? You need more?
Yeah.
You want more? Tell me you want some more.
That's good. Now, how about you? What did you get out of that?
Right. A partner to my broadcasting was my personal appearances. A partner. As important, or just almost as important, as getting on that microphone and reaching those millions, right? And reaching them, talking to them, was my personal appearances, because I was a live guy and they wanted to meet me. I was part of their family. It was essential that I get out as often as I can. And I did. I did shows. I can't tell you how many shows I did besides Palisades Park. I went to schools. I went to religious organizations. I went to meetings. I broadcast from corners. I went to neighborhoods. We gave away prizes. I'd pull up on a beach with our beachmobile or whatever the heck we called it, and we'd give away prizes and broadcast from there. So touching people, letting people physically hug you, because I became part of their families. And this was essential in what I was doing. So the combination of all those things made Cousin Brucie where I'm still doing it today. Am I still doing appearances today? If I could, I would. I miss my appearances. Every year I did a show at the PNC Center out in Homedale. It was now I'm going to do the rock and roll reunion as soon as we can get back to touching each other and maybe hugging once in a while. I did shows all the time, several times a year there. I appeared in churches, record hops, and doing all kinds of things. I did speeches. I became sort of a scholarly character. I was very lucky. I got a lot of awards. I've been in a lot of Hall of Fames, and I love talking. I love giving speeches. I am almost like a preacher when it comes to talking about radio and reaching people. That's in my heart. I believe I should have probably maybe been a man of the cloth. I've been a preacher. Maybe in one of my lives I was, because I have that in me. I have this spiritual thing in me, and I just want to share. I want to share. So the crux of this matter, the circle, is yes, the personal appearance as important as the radio show, being able to touch people in person.
So until 1964, your playlist featured the likes of Neil Sedaka, who wrote the introduction to your book.
Pardon me.
By all means, go ahead.
I don't have anything like you have. I noticed you had a butterfly on your cup.
That is, you were very observant. That's correct. Actually, it's a great cup, and it holds the hot water very well.
Well, I'm not as successful as you. Look what I have. Okay.
So Neil Sedaka, the Four Seasons, Frankie Avalon, Dion, the Beach Boys, Paul Anka, whom you helped introduce to listeners in the United States. And then came the British invasion led by the Beatles. Now, you tell a story in your book about you and your disc jockey colleagues sitting at WABC, sitting in a committee meeting in late 1963, playing I Want to Hold Your Hand. Now, what was your immediate reaction? And did you know that this band, did you have a sense that this band was about to change the world forever?
I swear, I wish I could say I was a genius. And yes, I did. None of us did. Matter of fact, very honestly, when we first started hearing this music, 62, pretty early, we got a little offended and a little incensed that here was this British upstart band, the Silver Beatles and the Beatles, emulating Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Everly Brothers, and Elvis. We weren't happy about that. We didn't realize that they were about to save the music industry, not only in America, but internationally. They had something very special. They had heart. They had the soul. They had home. There's that word again, home in them. And by the time they got over here, with all the hype and all the excitement, let me tell you something. They were on their way. How about a little story? I'll give you, I love this story. This is kind of a fun story. And it illustrates the audience and what happened when these guys first came over. So go about a month or so before the Beatles arrived on Pan Am Flight 101, right? At Idlewild Airport to become Kennedy Airport. This guy would get on the phone with me. His name was Joey. Joey would call me on my Saturday show for a request. Hey, Cousin Brucie, hey, man, we think you're really it. This is Joey. I live in the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. You know the Yankees, those guys. Would you play a record for me, girl? Her name is Susie Ann. I really would appreciate that. Play something by Elvis, will you? She loves Elvis. Hey, man, we really think you're the kid she is. We love you. Talk to you. Hang up. A month later, the Beatles arrive with all the fanfare, all the hype. The Beatles just didn't come over here, Dan. And the Lord said, I giveth thee the Beatles because you needeth them and you've been so good. Here's something to divert the problems. And we had a lot of problems. They were given a lot of hype, money, once again, money. Put a lot of money behind them to get people ready, a promotion. And everybody was ready. You couldn't walk into a restroom or a movie theater or a supermarket without seeing a picture of one of the boys, all of them, right? John, Paul, George, and Ringo. So a month later, the same guy calls me on the phone that Sunday night. Listen to the difference. Listen what happened. The Beatles, what they did to us. Hello, is this Majesty Cousin Brucie? I said, yeah. Well, this is Her Majesty, His Majesty Joseph of the Grand Concourse Shire in the Bronx. Would you mind playing a record for me and me bird, Lady Susie Ann? Susan Ann, please play something by the Beatles. I appreciate it. God bless the Queen. Ta-ta. We love you. God bless you, Cousin Brucie. Boom. All of a sudden, everybody was speaking the King's English, trip tongue. We dressed like them, wore hair like them, right? Spoke like them, and wanted to hear their music. Because right after the Beatles, a lot of other groups followed, like Dave Clark Five, the Hollies, the Fortunes, the Yardbirds, and the Rolling Stones, etc. This music taught the American music industry, this corporate, this big corporate monster, to think about changing a little bit and adding. You know, in America, in the United States, corporations have a belief, a culture. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? There's some grammar for it. Ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's what happened. They came over and things started changing because they realized that these people were bringing a new excitement to us. So the Beatles came over and changed everything. Changed everything. Here's the big postscript here. Little did we know, none of us realized what was going to happen, that the Beatles were going to become more than just their music. The music almost became on the same time, if not even secondary, to what they did culturally, sociologically to us. They became part of our bodies, our genetic souls. We looked like them, spoke like them, wanted to dress like them, and become being like them. So all of a sudden, we were all British again. We went back to the mother country. We didn't realize that was going to happen. And that's why today, Dan, they're as important, almost as important as they were 50 years ago. Amazing. Young kids all know the Beatles for that reason. They're part of us.
You and the Beatles hit it off right from the beginning, so much so that you were the one who introduced them at their famous Shea Stadium concert in August 1965. What did that performance and the music they wrote and played tell you about the group and its phenomenal success? I mean, the connection to those 55,000 fans at Shea who were connecting at that time. You just talked about the caller who called in and how that represents this transition to the love of this new sound. But what was it in that stadium, that electric performance and the reaction from the fans? What did that tell you?
Great story here. This is a great story and a great part of our lives. This is probably one of the most exciting, dynamic adventures I've ever had in my professional career. We were in the dugout waiting to go on. Oh, let me just tell, I'm sorry. I'll have to decline this. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to turn this off. Yep, this is part of our lives, folks. What can I tell you? What do you do without these things? You know, what did we do without these things? We survived. Oh, excuse me. Okay, there you go.
I have one here too.
Turn it off. Make sure it's. I can't tell you how many interviews I've done, and the host or myself forgot to turn that blankety blank thing off. Right. Anyway, we're in the dugout. This is a great story. I'm really sorry about that, folks. We're in the dugout, and John Lennon's there, and all the boys are there with us, with a couple hundred people, and smashed into this dugout at Shea Stadium. And John Lennon and Paul McCartney came over to me. We knew each other. And he said to me, John Lennon said, "Cousin," he always called me cousin. "Cousin, is this going to be okay? I mean, what's going on?" Here's what was happening. There was so much pressure and electricity and energy coming from those 55 to 65,000, right? I sort of will argue with you. I counted them. I counted 65, 830.
By the way, there were 500,000 people who say they were there that night.
That's right. I like that. I'm going to use that. That's a great line. Anyway, he asked me, what is going to happen? Is it going to be all right? And they were very scared because with all the experiences they had in the past, they never, ever felt the electricity. You know, we have in New York City a public utility called Con Edison. And I swear, Con Edison could have turned off their turbines that produce electricity that night. That electricity could have come from Shea Stadium. That there was so much going on. And I looked at him and I said with Paul, and they were both very nervous, you can see, because with all the experiences they had in Europe, nothing even came near this, duplicated this, the pressure. And I said to him, and I held my fingers behind my back, crossed my fingers. I held it behind my back. I said, "Don't worry about it, boys. We're safe. All I want to do, all I want to do is share space with you." I was scared stiff. I was really frightened because in all these shows that I've done, all these personal appearances that we talked about, never even came near the feeling of danger or a tidal wave coming and just sweeping us away. It was that amazing. I said, "We're going to be all right." As I said, I had the fingers behind me because I didn't believe a word I was saying. I was probably as frightened as they were. Well, we get ready to go on the stage. They're out in short center. They're on second base where I'm at home base. Ed Sullivan was asked to introduce them with Cousin Brucie. So he and I, and Sullivan, if you remember, Sullivan was really a really big show. It was a square. It was a square. Good journalist, but a square. He didn't know the Beatles, didn't know anything about the Beatles. And we're walking up, and then by this time he realized how monstrous they were, how big they were. And he turned around to me as he's on the second or third step, and he said, "Hey, Brucie, Cousin Brucie, is this going to be okay?" Because it was unbelievable, the pressure, the audience, and it was all just enthusiasm. And I knew I had this guy because his eyes were bulging, and he didn't belong there. I knew that, and I said, "No, I don't think so." He goes up another step. He turns around and he says, "What do we do?" And I looked at him, and inside I was smiling. I said, "Ed, pray, pray." He said, "Pray?" Eyes up, and we walk up. We introduced them, the Beatles. Everything was fine. Nobody really got hurt that day. The audience was there to be with them, share space, and the enthusiasm, the energy was overwhelming. Now, the postscript here, once again, is that nobody heard them sing. Couldn't hear them. I didn't hear them. I first heard the concert, the actual Shea Stadium concert, maybe a year or two ago. I was there. I mean, I was right there. In fact, while the concert was happening, I was patrolling the infield, prying kids' hands off the barbed wire, not the barbed, the chicken wire to keep them in their seats. And they were standing and taking pictures. And nobody got hurt. It was wonderful. The police were great. The security people at Shea Stadium were terrific. Everybody understood. The Beatles, they were on the stage. They did a performance, but they didn't really put out because they couldn't hear themselves. In those days, Dan, the equipment, the foldback equipment, the monitoring equipment, as well as the equipment to hear, not too good. It was the 60s. It was just developing. So, as I said, I didn't hear that concert until a couple of years ago.
Well, it was a memorable evening. Bruce, I have one final question because it gets back to to the beginning in a way. The first song you played at WABC in 1961, I think, was Chuck Berry's Maybelline. Today, that song is 65 years old, and yet its raucous beat sounds as fresh today as it did then. How do you explain the enduring popularity of the music of that era? And I listen to oldies radio, and I never tire of it. But is it more than just nostalgia, or is it also the music?
Nostalgia is a very good part of it because that's part of our makeup, our genetic makeup. You have nostalgia, you feel at home, you feel comfortable, you feel good because you recognize it. Well, I have a saying. Let's see. Let me see if I can conjure up that saying. Is it music? Let's see. Oh gosh, I had a great saying that really illustrates this point. All right, I'll think about it later. Maybe I'll get it. But the music is so easy. When you can hum a song or almost whistle a song after the first time you heard it, you have something. The music is simplistic. The chord structure is simple. There's a few chords. The lyric structure, the poetic part of it is very simple. It's about day-to-day life, things that we recognize and are comfortable with. The music is so easy for the soul, so easy to accept. It's like having food you love. It's like going into your cousin's house, right? You're comfortable there. It's a comfort zone. So the music is very, very important from that era. After a while, the poets and the record companies, the producers, started getting a little fancy. I don't think we need fireworks. We don't need a rocket ship taking off in an audience. We don't need explosions. We don't need, I don't know. I don't know. The things they do today, lights and cameras, it takes away from what we are wanting to be there for. We're forgetting we're there for the music. And in those days, it was the music that counted. Maybe there was one other thing maybe we used to dress up once in a while in silly tuxedos and things like that. And they'd learn some dance steps, dance steps. That's fine. But that's where it ended because the music was the message. Who said the music is the message? The media is the message. Right. Very important. What was his name?
Marshall McLuhan.
McLuhan. I said McLuhan. The music is the message. And that's what wasn't a secret. But we forgot that. We forgot that. And today we have the video things on television and wherever they get them now on their devices. And the movie itself, the video, takes precedent over the music. There's so much going on with it sexually and emotionally and psychologically and visually that the music sort of takes a back step, becomes part of the background. And the days when I'm thinking about it, and I still practice, the music is in the foreground, right up here, and everything else is back.
Well, for old fans and new, you now have the opportunity to enjoy Cousin Brucie every week on WABC, the station that pioneered rock and roll radio. The program is Cousin Brucie's Saturday Night Rock and Roll Dance Party, which airs every Saturday night from, as of the 31st, Bruce, from 6 to 10 p.m.
Right.
On 77 WABC in New York, which is streamed nationally. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us and also for all the joy that you bring to so many people. It's really been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. Always nice seeing you, and I'm looking forward to have dinner or lunch with you again real soon. And to the organization, give them my very, very best. Godspeed, and let's pray that pretty soon we can all be back together and hugging each other.
Exactly. Tremendous thanks to Bruce Morrow, Cousin Brucie, to his legion of fans for joining me today. And thank you for checking out this conversation with B'nai B'rith. Now, if you like what you've heard, make sure you never miss a program by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel and liking us on Facebook. And be sure to visit our website, bnaibrith.org, to learn more about our important work. See you again soon. Take care, everyone.